Hey man, let me tell you something that's gonna shatter everything you've been taught about connection. When a woman looks at you with those curious eyes and says, "Tell me about yourself," she doesn't actually want to know. Not really. Not the deep stuff. Not the wounds you carry. Not the existential questions keeping you up at night. Not the failures that shaped you or the fears that haunt you. She thinks she wants to know. She might even believe it when she asks. But what she's actually craving has nothing to do with information about your life. She's craving a feeling, a vibe, an experience, an energy that makes her feel alive in your presence. And here's where most men destroy themselves. They take her curiosity at face value. They think, finally, someone who wants to know the real me. So they open the floodgates, they pour out their story, the trauma, the pain, the philosophical confusion, the identity crisis they've been silently wrestling with, and they watch her lean back. They watch her eyes glaze over. They watch the warmth drain from the room as she suddenly remembers something she needs to do, and they're left wondering what went wrong. What went wrong is simple. You gave her weight when she asked for wonder. You gave her burden when she wanted vibe. You gave her your diary when she wanted your presence. And that exchange, that fatal misunderstanding of what women actually want from you, is what kills attraction faster than anything else. Today I'm going to tell you the truth about emotional expression in dating. The truth that contradicts everything you've been taught by therapists, movies, and the culture that's been lying to you about what creates desire. And this truth is going to set you free. You've been sold a lie. The lie goes something like this. Women want men who are emotionally available. Women want vulnerability. Women want you to open up, share your feelings, cry in front of them, let them see the real you. And on the surface, it sounds beautiful. It sounds like evolution from the toxic masculinity of the past. It sounds like the path to deeper connection. So you follow the advice. You meet a woman you really like. Things are going well. And because you want to create something real, something deeper than surface level attraction, you start sharing. You tell her about your difficult childhood. You explain the pain that shaped you. You open up about your fears, your insecurities, your moments of doubt about who you are and where you're going. And for a moment, maybe she listens. Maybe she nods sympathetically. Maybe she even says, "Thank you for sharing that with me." But then, watch what happens in the days that follow. The texts become less frequent, the energy becomes different, the warmth you felt from her starts cooling, and you can't figure out why. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just being honest. You were just being real. You were just doing what every piece of modern relationship advice told you to do, and it backfired. Because here's what nobody explained to you. There's a fundamental difference between what women say they want and what actually triggers their attraction. She says she wants emotional availability. What she means is she wants a man who understands emotions without drowning in them. She says she wants vulnerability. What she means is she wants to occasionally glimpse your depth, not have it poured onto her lap like she's your therapist. She says she wants to know the real you. What she means is she wants to feel the presence of a man who's already figured himself out, not a man who's still lost and hoping she'll help him find the way. This is the gap that destroys men who are genuinely trying to connect. They take her words literally when she's speaking emotionally, and they pay for it with her attraction. Let me explain what's actually happening in her psychology when you overshare. Female attraction operates on polarity. Masculine and feminine energies create a charge between them, and that charge is what she experiences as desire. The masculine role in this polarity is containment. You are the steady force, the grounded presence, the man whose internal world is ordered enough that he doesn't need to process it out loud. The feminine role is expression. She gets to feel, to share, to experience the full range of her emotional landscape. And here's the key. She wants to express into your containment. She wants to bring her storms to your stillness. She wants to feel her emotions crash against your unshakable presence like waves against a cliff. But when you start matching her, when you start expressing, sharing, emoting with the same intensity she does, the polarity collapses. Suddenly you're not the cliff, you're another wave, and waves don't desire other waves. They desire something solid to crash against. This is why the moment you start mirroring Her emotional tendencies, something shifts in her. Not consciously, she probably can't articulate it, but deep in her nervous system an alarm goes off. If he's falling apart, who's holding the structure? If he needs me to understand him, who's gonna understand me? If he's drowning in his emotions, how can I trust him to handle mine? She doesn't think these questions, she feels them, and what she feels is a slow withdrawal of attraction. Not because you're broken, but because you showed her the broken parts before you transformed them into strength. Here's something that's gonna sting, but you need to hear it. When you share your serious struggles, not the surface ones like a rough day at work, but the deep ones, the I don't know who I am anymore ones, the I feel like I'm losing control of my life ones, she doesn't experience it as intimacy. She experiences it as weight, burden, pressure. And she didn't sign up for pressure, she signed up for a feeling. Think about what drew her to you in the first place. It wasn't your problems, it wasn't your pain, it wasn't your philosophical confusion about the meaning of existence, it was your energy, your confidence, your presence, the way you made her feel when she was around you, alive, feminine, attracted. That's what she wanted. And when you start unpacking your inner chaos, you're not adding to that feeling, you're subtracting from it. You're taking the man she was attracted to and replacing him with someone she now has to take care of. Someone whose emotional state she's suddenly responsible for. Someone who needs her to understand, to validate, to fix. And that role, the role of your emotional caretaker, is the opposite of what creates desire in her. She didn't come to be your therapist, she came to be your woman, and the moment she feels the weight of your unprocessed pain, she starts questioning whether you're the man she thought you were. Let me show you how this plays out in real time. Imagine you're on a third date, things are going well, there's chemistry, there's connection, she's leaning in, laughing, touching your arm, and then the conversation turns deeper. She asks about your past, your family, your journey. You think this is your moment to be real, so you tell her about the divorce that wrecked you, or the business failure that made you question everything, or the depression you've been battling for years, or the existential crisis you're in the middle of right now. You're being authentic, you're being honest, you're doing what every piece of advice told you to do, but watch her body language shift. The leaning in becomes leaning back, the laughter becomes polite smiles. The touching stops. She's not doing this to be cruel. She's not consciously pulling away, but something inside her just registered. This man is still figuring himself out. This man needs someone to understand his pain. This man carries weight that I might have to help him carry. And that realization, even if she can't name it, kills the spark she was feeling. Because attraction doesn't grow from understanding. It grows from presence, from strength, from the feeling of being with a man who has his world handled. And you just showed her that your world isn't handled. Not yet. Here's the paradox you must understand. She doesn't want to know everything about you. She wants to feel like she's discovering you. There's a massive difference when you dump your life story, your traumas, your fears onto her, especially early in the relationship. You rob her of the experience of unfolding you layer by layer. You turn yourself from a mystery into an open book. And open books don't captivate, they just sit there, fully exposed, with nothing left to discover. Think about the men women obsess over in movies, novels, stories. Are they the oversharing types? The men who explain every wound and fear and insecurity? No, they're calm, composed, guarded. They reveal themselves through action, not confession, and women fall hard for them. Why? Because these men embody masculine self-possession. The man who could speak but chooses not to. The man who feels everything but leaks nothing. The man who holds his depth behind a wall that she has to earn access to. And that earning, that gradual unveiling, is what creates fascination. When you give it all away too fast, you rob her of the chase. You turn yourself from an exploration into an explanation. And explanations aren't sexy, mysteries are. Let's talk about what she's actually testing for when she asks deep questions. When she says, tell me about your past, or what are you afraid of, or what's the hardest thing you've been through? She's not always looking for the answer. She's watching your reaction. She's testing to see, does this man flinch? Does he unravel? Does he desperately try to make me understand his pain? Does his composure break under emotional pressure? That's the real test. And most men fail it by thinking the content of their answer matters more than the energy behind it. They think if they just explain themselves thoroughly enough, she'll understand and love them. But women aren't looking to understand you, they're looking to feel you. And when your energy feels centered, when you can acknowledge pain without being owned by it, when you can speak about the past without needing her to heal it, when your composure doesn't break just because the conversation got serious, you pass the test. You show her something rare, a man who has weathered storms and emerged still standing, a man whose identity doesn't depend on her validation, a man who doesn't need to be understood to feel significant. That's the man she can't stop thinking about. That's the man who becomes unforgettable. Here's where this gets even deeper. A woman doesn't fall in love with your story. She falls in love with your presence, your ability to walk into a room and own it without saying a word, your calm when chaos hits, your focus when emotions run high, your groundedness when she throws her feminine storms at you. That's what captivates her, not your confession of how hard life has been, not your explanation of why you are the way you are. Not your therapy session about the wounds you're still carrying. She doesn't want the man inside the struggle. She wants the man who came through the struggle and emerged composed. Think about that. She wants the after, not the during. She wants the warrior who returned from battle, not the soldier still bleeding on the field. She wants to see that look in your eyes, the one that says you've been to war with yourself but came back with a crown of fire. And feel safe in the presence of someone who has already conquered what would break lesser men. But when you give her the during, when you share pain that you haven't yet transformed into strength, you don't look like a warrior, you look like a wound. And she didn't fall for your wounds, she fell for what you became despite them. This is why you must transform your pain before you transmit it. Your trauma, your fear, your existential confusion. These aren't things to share with a woman you're dating. At least not in their raw form. They're things to process alone, to alchemize in solitude, to turn from chaos into clarity before you walk into a room with her. Because women don't want to process with you. They want to witness the man who has already processed. That's the difference between attractive and exhausting. The man who says, I went through hell and here's how it broke me. He exhausts her. The man who carries the energy of someone who went through hell but doesn't need to talk about it to validate himself, he captivates her. It's not about hiding who you are, it's about mastering what you've been through before you deliver it. And that mastery shows in your presence, your calm, your groundedness, not in your words. You can't use her as your therapist. The moment you do, you shift from lover to liability in her mind. And once she sees you as something she has to fix or save, the attraction doesn't just dim, it dies. Let me tell you about the power of what you withhold. There's a strange irony in attraction. The more you reveal, the less fascinating you become. But when you hold something back, not from fear, but from self-respect, she feels the presence of a man who values himself. A man who doesn't need to be fully understood to feel complete. A man who knows his depths are valuable and doesn't hand them to just anyone. That lack of need becomes irresistible. She starts leaning in harder. She starts asking more questions. She starts trying to crack the code of who you are, not because you're playing games, but because you've created space for her curiosity to flourish. And that curiosity is the seed of obsession. When you become an emotional mystery, she becomes an emotional detective. And the more she has to chase the truth of who you are, the more invested she becomes in the image of you she's creating. That image, that fantasy she builds in the absence of full information, is more powerful than any confession you could ever make. You don't want to be the man who's easy to figure out. You want to be the man she can't stop thinking about. The man who hints at storms he survived, but never gives her the full map. The man whose silence speaks louder than other men's speeches. The man who makes her feel like access to his soul is something sacred, something earned, something rare. That's the seduction. That's the gravity. That's what keeps her coming back. Now let me make an important distinction, because I don't want you to misunderstand this. Containment is not suppression. I'm not telling you to bury your emotions or pretend you don't have pain. That would be just as destructive in the long run. What I'm telling you is this: there's a difference between mastering your emotions and hiding them. The man who contains is a man who has done the work. He's felt the pain, he's sat with the fear, he's wrestled with the existential questions, but he's done it on his own time, in his own way, without needing external validation. So when he walks into a room, he carries the energy of someone whose internal world is ordered, not because he's never had chaos, but because he's already conquered it. That's not coldness, that's power. The suppressed man is different. He's running from his emotions, pretending they don't exist, and that avoidance creates its own kind of weakness, one that women sense just as quickly. But the contained man, he's not running, he's already arrived. He doesn't need to explain his journey because you can feel it in his presence, his calm under pressure, his groundedness when she tests him, his refusal to be rattled by emotional storms, his own or hers. That's the man who becomes an anchor for her, not because he solved her problems, but because he's already solved his own. Here's something you need to understand about the modern world. We're constantly being told to share more, cry more, open up more, especially men. There's a cultural narrative that says masculine stoicism is toxic, that emotional expression is the path to connection, that vulnerability is the key to being loved. And yet, look around. The men who follow this advice, who share everything, who make their emotional processing a public event, they're getting ghosted, rejected, friend-zoned. While the men who maintain mystery, who reveal slowly, who don't explain themselves constantly, they're the ones women chase. Why? Because attraction is primal, and the feminine craves polarity, not parity. She doesn't want a mirror, she wants a force. When you're too open, too verbal, too eager to connect on every emotional level, she begins to mother you in her mind. And once she mothers you, she can't desire you. That's the shift. It happens subtly, in the spaces between your long monologues about your feelings, in the moments when your sincerity starts to feel like neediness. And once it happens, she starts looking elsewhere. Not for more words, not for deeper conversations, but for a man who doesn't explain himself. A man who just is. A man who commands presence like a mountain commands the landscape. Not because he talks about the storms he survived, but because you can feel them in his silence. So what do you actually do with all this? You master your world, then say less. Show her who you are through your presence, not your paragraphs. Let your composure do the talking. Let your calm under pressure reveal your strength. Let the way you handle life's challenges demonstrate what you've overcome. Stop confusing openness with strength. Openness without boundaries is not vulnerability. It's weakness wearing a noble mask. Real strength is being so grounded in who you are that you don't need validation, sympathy, or deep conversations to feel seen. You see yourself, you've processed your own story, and now you wear it in your posture, your eyes, your decisions. That's what she wants to feel. That's what creates desire. Not the man who pours his soul out, hoping to be loved, but the man who already loves himself enough to protect what's sacred. Here's the paradox that will change everything once you accept it. The less you try to connect through words, the more connected she'll feel. The less you explain yourself, the more she'll want to understand. The less you give, the more she'll chase. This isn't manipulation. This is understanding how feminine desire actually works. She doesn't want the man who hands her his journal. She wants the man who makes her wonder what's written in it. She doesn't want the man who needs her to understand. She wants the man who's already whole without her understanding. She doesn't want your story, she wants your presence. And when your presence says, I've been through things that would break other men and I came out stronger and I don't need to talk about it to prove it, that's when she can't look away. That's when she respects you in a way that verbal intimacy could never create. That's when desire ignites and stays lit. So remember this. It's not that women don't care about your pain, your dreams, your fears. It's that they only respect the man who has transformed them, the man who has walked through fire and doesn't smell like smoke anymore, the man who doesn't bleed when poked, doesn't rant when rejected, doesn't pour his heart out on command, hoping it will make her stay. She'll never love your story more than your power, never love your words more than your aura. Never love your explanations more than your presence. The man who understands this, who leads with energy, not confession, becomes unforgettable. because he gives her something no open diary of a man ever could. The feeling of being in the presence of something rare, something she can't quite figure out, something she wants to keep exploring forever. And that feeling, that magnetic, intoxicating sense that she's standing next to a man who doesn't need her to feel complete, is what keeps her coming back. Not your vulnerability, not your honesty, not your emotional availability, your power, your containment, your rare and guarded depth. That's what she's been searching for. That's what she can't find in a world of men who've been taught to bleed in public. And when she finds it in you, when she feels the stillness behind your eyes, the strength in your silence, the mystery in your restraint, she doesn't just want you, she needs you, because you're not like the others. You're not performing vulnerability, hoping to be loved. You're embodying power, knowing that love follows. And that, brother, is the difference between men who get left and men who get worshipped. Become the second. Let your presence speak. And never apologize for the sacred boundary around your soul. That boundary isn't coldness. It's the very thing that makes you unforgettable.